Hey everyone, my name is Chris Dismuke, and today I'll be giving a book talk on one of my favorite books, Shoe Dog. Here's the plan of what I plan to talk about today. First, I'll give you guys a quick introduction and about me to give you a better idea of who I am. Then, I'll talk a little bit about the book, Shoe Dog. Next, I'll give you guys a couple reasons why I think you will love this book. And then I'll finally end off this discussion with some of my closing thoughts about what we talked through. A little bit about me. First of all, I went to Texas A&M and I studied chemical engineering. And while I was there, I got a minor in business. Currently, I'm working as an analyst for ExxonMobil. This means that I use math, statistics, and a little bit of computer programming to predict the price movements of commodities like oil, natural gas, and gasoline. Outside of work and my studies, I am a big sports lover. I enjoy both playing sports, watching sports, and also participating in some simulations, otherwise known as fantasy sports. Really a big fan of all sports, but some of my favorites include football, basketball, and tennis. And finally, I consider myself a big nonfiction reader. When I was growing up, most of the books that we read in school or that we were introduced to were really fiction books. So this included things like Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, or a lot of the other books that you may see on your bookshelves. And I really didn't know a whole lot about nonfiction books. So because of that, for some reason those stories just didn't ring home with me. I much preferred to watch TV or watch movies than read books. But as I got older, I got introduced to the idea of nonfiction books. And this really opened up a whole new world to me. And really opened my eyes to the potential of what being a big reader could be. And so since discovering nonfiction books, I've become a big fan of books about investing, technology, how to improve your personal productivity, and even biographies. And when I found this, it really transformed my relationship with reading from somebody who never reads books to somebody who reads 2 or 3 books a month at a minimum. And I take what I learned from these books, apply them to my daily life, and also just get a lot of enjoyment out of them. So today, though, like I mentioned, I'm going to talk to you guys about a book called Shoe Dog. This book is a biography, and it's an autobiography, actually, of Phil Knight, written by Phil Knight, about Phil Knight. And for those of you who don't know who he is, he's actually the founder of Nike, one of the world's most valuable companies, and definitely the most well-known retailer of sports apparel and footwear. I'm sure many of you guys know Nike shoes. It's recognizable by the big check mark, and they also own brands like the Jordan Jumpman brand. This book is a really popular book. It's won a lot of awards. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's an International Biography of the Year finalist, and then it's also recognized by a lot of people who are really smart and know a lot about business, including Warren Buffett, where he named it his personal book of the year. And then it also made Bill Gates' book list for, I think, 2016. The book is about the founding of Nike, and it recounts the life of Phil Knight from shortly before he actually founded Nike all the way through to just a few years ago when Nike was one of the world's largest and most valuable companies. I really enjoy this book because it's really thrilling. The story of Nike is super fascinating. It's got lots of twists and turns. One thing that really stuck out in my mind is the way that Phil Knight actually founded Nike. He actually traveled around the world, and this was back in the 60s when it was really hard to travel around the world. He went to Japan and talked to somebody and found out how they were making these shoes and said, man, I think I can take these shoes, sell them in the US, and make a lot of money. And so he was managing, these international sales, buying shoes in Japan, importing them into the west coast of the U.S., and then selling them and making a ton of money at a time where a lot of people didn't know about, this globalization of business. And so he was one of the first people that really showed the value that it could achieve. At the same time, he was building this huge brand. A lot of us know a lot of the famous athletes that are sponsored by Nike, and Phil Knight was really one of the first ones that brought about the role of the influencer, as it's now called, into modern pop culture. And he did it all while building this multi-billion-dollar company. The other fascinating thing that I didn't realize that I learned through reading this book is that Nike really struggled with bankruptcy a lot of the time. So even, when it was this huge company creating the most amount of shoes, selling to people all over the world, it was running a very thin line between being successful and being bankrupt. And so this creates for a very fascinating story for anybody who wants to know a bit more about the company called Nike. And so in terms of who I think this book is great for, I think a lot of people would love it, but particularly if any of these things describe you, I think you'll really like this book. First and foremost, because it's Nike, this book is great for anybody who loves sports. So if you find yourself, following along with any of the big sports teams, you're a fan of LeBron James or Tiger Woods, this book would be great for you. Also, if you're interested in business or entrepreneurship and some of the challenges and opportunities that can bring along, I think this book will really be a good one for you. Another one that may be a bit more personal to why some people would really love this book is if you are either going through or have recently gone through hard times. I think you can really relate to this book because throughout his journey of founding, creating, and growing Nike, Phil Knight really went through a lot of struggles, both on a personal and professional level. And from reading this book, I think you can get a lot of tips and insights into the way that somebody who's really successful handled some of those trials and tribulations that we all face in our personal life. And then finally, maybe a little bit unexpected, but if you like to travel, I think this is another really great book for you because that's really part of the story of Nike. It's the story about the globalization of a business. And Phil Knight really does a great job of kind of bringing in a lot of different cultural elements to the company of Nike. And, he really founded the company itself on a trip around the world. So if anybody's really interested in learning more about cultures, learning about traveling, this is another book that would give you a lens into somebody who's done a lot of that, primarily being Phil Knight. And so lastly, before you go, I thought I'd share a couple of kind of closing thoughts to sum this up. First off, I want to really emphasize the point that fiction isn't for everyone. This book, not a fiction book, but it's a great book. And it's really one of the ones for me that kind of opened my eyes about the great things that reading can bring about in a context that we're not used to, being nonfiction. A lot of people get caught up in the stories of fiction. Those are great. For me personally, it doesn't work. And autobiographies like this really show that there is a lot of value in reading books that aren't just fiction. Next, Shoe Dog. It's a great biography. Anybody that's interested in sports, adventure, building businesses, or traveling the world, Shoe Dog is a great one, and I highly recommend it to all of you. And then lastly, of course, this is Nike, so I couldn't close this off by saying anything other than just do it. Well, I'm going to change that a little bit and say just read, and especially just read Shoe Dog if you're interested in a great biography, a great story about a company that we all know and love. Thanks for listening. Bye.